Wife left me for my plastic surgeon after her procedures. The malpractice suit I filed made both their lives miserable. Everything started falling apart the moment she walked through our front door with those bandages still wrapped around her chest. She looked different not just physically, but there was something in her eyes that I had never seen before. The woman I married 15 years ago seemed to have vanished somewhere between the consultation room and the operating table. Her entire demeanor had shifted, like she was carrying some secret that was too heavy for our marriage to bear. The recovery period was supposed to bring us closer together, or at least that's what I naively believed when I agreed to pay for the procedures. Instead, she became increasingly distant, spending hours on her phone and making excuses to leave the house for follow-up appointments that seemed to happen way too frequently. When I offered to drive her to these appointments, she would get defensive and insist she could handle it herself. Something about her tone told me that these weren't just routine medical visits anymore. 3 months after the surgery, I discovered the truth in the most devastating way possible. She had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, and a notification popped up from a messaging app I didn't even know she had installed. The preview showed enough to make my stomach drop through the floor. Messages between her and someone with the same name as her surgeon, filled with intimate details about their relationship and plans to meet up while I was at work. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through weeks of conversations that painted a picture of an affair that had been going on since before her surgery was even completed. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, but reading how she described me as someone who was holding her back from living her best life. According to these messages, I was apparently boring, predictable, and completely incompatible with the new version of herself that she was becoming. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything we had ever experienced in our marriage. She didn't even try to deny it when I showed her the evidence. Instead, she looked almost relieved that the secret was finally out in the open. She told me that what happened between her and the surgeon was something she never planned, but it made her realize how unhappy she had been in our relationship for years. Within a week, she had moved out of our house and into an apartment that was conveniently located just 10 minutes away from his practice. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, delivered by a process server who looked genuinely sorry to be doing his job. She wanted half of everything, including the house that my grandfather had helped us buy, and she expected me to just accept it without putting up any kind of fight. But something inside me had shifted too, and I wasn't about to let this situation destroy my life without at least trying to fight back. I started researching everything I could about medical ethics and professional misconduct. The more I learned about the rules that govern doctor-patient relationships, the more I realized that what had happened wasn't just morally wrong, it was potentially illegal and definitely grounds for a malpractice lawsuit. The lawyer I consulted was initially skeptical about my case, but his attitude changed dramatically when I showed him the evidence I had collected. Text messages, photos, and even some recorded phone calls that I had saved from her phone before she moved out. He explained that doctors who engage in sexual relationships with patients during active treatment face serious professional consequences, including the loss of their medical license. Filing the lawsuit felt like stepping into a whole new world that I never wanted to be part of. The legal paperwork was complicated and expensive, but I was determined to see it through to the end. The surgeon's reputation was everything to him, and a public lawsuit would potentially destroy the practice he had spent decades building. That thought gave me more satisfaction than I probably should have admitted to myself. The first few months of the legal process were brutal for everyone involved. The surgeon tried to settle out of court multiple times, offering increasingly larger amounts of money to make the whole thing disappear. But money wasn't really what I was after anymore. I wanted him to face consequences for what he had done, and I wanted my wife to understand that actions have repercussions. The depositions were particularly satisfying to witness. Watching both of them squirm under oath as they tried to explain their relationship without admitting to any wrongdoing was almost worth all the pain they had caused me. The surgeon's lawyer was good, but even he couldn't make their story sound believable when all the evidence was laid out chronologically. During this time, I discovered that my wife wasn't the first patient he had become involved with. The investigation uncovered at least 3 other women who had similar experiences, though none of them had been willing to come forward publicly. This information strengthened my case significantly and made it clear that this was a pattern of behavior, not just a one-time mistake. The most unexpected twist came when I found out that the surgeon had been lying to my wife about his intentions from the very beginning. Private investigator records showed that he was actually married himself, living in a different state, and had been using his practice as a way to meet women for extramarital affairs. When my wife discovered this truth, she was just as devastated as I had been when I found out about their relationship. She came to me crying, asking for forgiveness and begging me to drop the lawsuit. She claimed that she had been manipulated and that she never would have gotten involved if she had known the truth about his situation. Part of me felt sorry for her, but another part of me recognized that she had made her choices and now had to live with the consequences just like I was doing. The lawsuit continued to progress, and the surgeon's professional life began to crumble under the weight of the investigation. His medical board launched their own inquiry, other patients started coming forward with complaints, and several hospitals where he had privileges began distancing themselves from him. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly everyone in our small community knew exactly what had happened. My wife's new relationship fell apart completely when the surgeon's wife found out about everything and filed for divorce herself. She was left alone in that expensive apartment, struggling to pay rent on a part-time income while dealing with the public humiliation of having her personal life exposed in court documents. The glamorous new life she thought she was getting turned into a nightmare that she couldn't escape. The financial pressure on both of them was enormous. Legal fees, court costs, and the loss of income from his damaged reputation meant that the surgeon was bleeding money faster than he could earn it. My wife had to move back in with her parents, something that would have been unthinkable to her just a year earlier when she was feeling so confident about her new appearance and lifestyle. As the case moved toward trial, both sides became increasingly desperate to find a resolution. The surgeon's insurance company was threatening to drop him, which would have made it impossible for him to continue practicing medicine. My wife was facing her own legal troubles, as the investigation revealed that she had been aware of his marital status much earlier than she had initially claimed. The settlement we eventually reached was substantial enough to set me up comfortably for the rest of my life. More importantly, the surgeon was forced to surrender his medical license and could never practice medicine again. He lost his practice, his marriage, and his reputation all at the same time. The satisfaction of seeing him face real consequences for his actions was worth more to me than any amount of money. My wife tried to reconcile with me after everything fell apart, but too much had happened for us to ever go back to what we had before. The trust was completely broken, and even though I understood that she had been manipulated to some degree, I couldn't forgive the way she had treated me during the entire ordeal. The divorce was finalized quietly, without any of the drama that had characterized the malpractice case. Looking back now, I realized that the lawsuit wasn't really about revenge, even though that's how it started. It was about holding people accountable for their actions and making sure that other families didn't have to go through what I experienced. The surgeon's pattern of behavior would have continued if someone hadn't been willing to stand up and fight back against it. The whole experience taught me things about myself that I never would have learned otherwise. I discovered that I was much stronger than I had ever imagined, and that I could handle situations that once would have completely overwhelmed me. The man who timidly agreed to pay for his wife's surgery was gone, replaced by someone who wouldn't be taken advantage of so easily. These days, I live a much simpler life than I did when I was married. The settlement money allowed me to pay off all my debts and buy a small house in a different part of town where nobody knows my story. I've started dating again, but I'm much more careful about the people I let into my life. Trust comes much harder now, but I think that's probably a good thing. The surgeon moved to a different state and now works in some kind of sales position, making a fraction of what he used to earn. According to mutual acquaintances, he's bitter about what happened and blames me for destroying his life. I don't feel any sympathy for him, considering that he destroyed mine first and would have continued destroying other people's lives if he hadn't been stopped. My ex-wife eventually found another relationship, but it's with someone much different from the surgeon. She seems to have learned from her mistakes and is apparently much happier now, though we don't have any direct contact anymore. Sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about how different things might have been if she had just been honest with me from the beginning, instead of sneaking around behind my back. The legal victory felt good at the time, but the real satisfaction came from rebuilding my life on my own terms. I learned that I don't need someone else's approval to be happy, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well despite what other people have done to you. The whole experience was painful, but it ultimately made me a stronger and more independent person than I had ever been before. I still get occasional updates about both of them through mutual friends, and it's clear that neither of them has fully recovered from the consequences of their actions. The surgeon's reputation never recovered, and my ex-wife still struggles with the social stigma of how our marriage ended. Part of me feels like justice was served, even though it took a long time and cost everyone involved more than they probably expected. The most important lesson I learned from this whole ordeal is that you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you respond to their actions. I chose to fight back instead of just accepting what happened, and that choice changed the entire trajectory of my life. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I questioned whether it was worth all the stress and expense, but I'm glad I saw it through to the end. Sometimes people ask me if I regret filing the lawsuit, especially considering how much it cost me emotionally and financially. The answer is always no, because it wasn't just about getting back at the people who hurt me. It was about standing up for myself and making sure that there were consequences for behavior that destroyed families and violated professional ethics. That principle was worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. These days, I'm focused on building a future that doesn't depend on anyone else's choices or actions. I've learned to find happiness in simple things, and I've discovered interests and hobbies that I never had time for when I was married. The man I am now is someone I actually like and respect, which wasn't always true before everything happened. Looking back, I can see that the lawsuit was really just the beginning of a much larger journey toward becoming the person I was meant to be. The marriage might have been comfortable, but it wasn't really making me happy. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal what you're really made of, and I'm grateful that I discovered my own strength even though it came at such a high price. The final hearing was almost anticlimactic after everything we had been through. Both sides signed the settlement papers, and just like that, it was over. No dramatic speeches, no emotional outbursts, just signatures on legal documents that would change all of our lives forever. Walking out of that courthouse felt like being released from a prison that I had been carrying around for years. I never saw either of them again after that day, and I hope I never do. Some chapters of your life are meant to be closed permanently, and this was definitely one of them. The future I'm building now is based on lessons learned from the past, but it's not defined by what happened to me. That's probably the best revenge of all.